Yes, Brexit summarised on one slide: three elections, three prime ministers, and three failed attempts to Brexit. And I thought we'd have a fourth one, but it seems as though we're going to get the Brexit that we deserve, whatever that means. So that's done the past. Now the future, because the future is the only thing I'm interested in. This project, I suppose, is wider than Brexit, although Brexit is a strong feature in it. In fact, it is perhaps one of the endpoints. But Rebooting Britain encompasses more, and we have someone here who's also got a project on Reboot Britain that we might later on talk a little bit about that. But and our versions are not very far apart actually, but it's actually reinstalling democracy. But to do that, we've probably got to get rid of some of the undesirable elements. And that includes Brexit and the culture carriers of Brexit. So, what's this about then? I made these predictions when I started this back in January. I did a slide in March 2020, and I came up with a bit of management consultant jargon. The socio-economic climate in UK PLC come August 2020. I didn't think I could predict very far. So I made some predictions at the beginning of COVID, having been a chemist once, and started to think what the combination of COVID and Brexit might give us. And in fact, I'm pleased to say that when we looked at this in September, we found out many of the things had come true. I predicted that the UK would be in a state of PTSD, akin to being after a major war, maybe quite not quite like that, but yeah, certainly we have some difficult problems in our heads. We'll have heard a lot of lies. Yes, we have. We've heard a lot of lies about deaths. We're not sure. I'm not sure now whether we're on 90,000 real deaths or 200,000, depending on how you count. And the economic disaster clearly has bitten hard as the L-shaped recession accelerates. And L means long, by the way. And we will have this sort of strange social dystopia spurred on by all the the sort of trial separation of COVID, of Brexit is really what we had with COVID, the fruit and veg shortages and fear of being close to people. And I noticed this in where I live in Kent, that it's quite visible on the streets with low level anger amongst people, families, and that just very close to sort of the trigger. And I said, and I think this hasn't happened, that there was political stasis, but I was thinking that an opposition might show its teeth. Not sure that one has really come true. And then Boris would say on top of COVID, let's get Brexit done. And I didn't think that would go very well. But I was wrong because he did do it. So therefore, where are we now and what's going on into the future? What are we trying to do here? And I've read it, I've written it so it doesn't need me to read it out, so I'm not going to read it out. But to end Brexit by all reasonable means, and this embraces all the sort of forward-looking campaigns of rejoin, renew, anything that starts with an R, really. But the movement will be popular, but not populist. Some of you will know that I've done quite a lot of things that try to take on populists on their own ground to reach outside the bubble. But being popular doesn't have to mean populist, but I think it is important to be popular if we're going to get a movement. So not being attached to parties particularly, but willing to discuss party politics and crucially restoring trust and honesty to politics, which would be a jolly good thing. We may, and there are some people that aren't here tonight, choose to be non-party campaigners in elections to try and get Tories out where there's a knife edge seat in the local elections, for example. But crucially, we aim to unblock this parliamentary paralysis, which has helped to give us Brexit. Take back control, where have you heard that before, of the populist media, the ones that actually are feeding people with daily lies, the Daily Mail, the Daily Excess and the Sun, particularly, and to break into this dead cat politics. We will collaborate with national movements. I myself am a European movement member. We have people that we already work with at board members, such as some of you on here. Not just the European movement, but particularly the European movement. And I think we're rather keen for people to, if they can, to join that at this point, because they have emerged as the long-term organisation rather than the sort of the quangos that did spring up at various times and seem to have now gotten rid of. How we know if we've finished Our work will be complete when hardly anyone cares about Brexit. I know that nobody cares about Brexit. Well, I mean, genuinely don't care. In fact, they don't want it anymore. And the culture carriers have been put into a shallow grave, not literally, of course. You might be saying, well, that's why. So what's how? So we've been working on this for about a year now, and we do 4 things on a weekly basis to try and use the same skills that gave us Brexit, the divide and conquer strategies, some of the more corrosive strategies, as well as the facilitation and support and enablement of people to realise they were wrong. So it's both the pull strategies and the push ones to break parliamentary paralysis using a variety of means, to get in the press, even in the press that some of us don't like, because it makes our flesh crawl, but that's where the action is, as well as the normal press, as it were. To accelerate our efforts on social media, we have groups already that are sort of essentially amplifier groups, so that we get our message out more clearly. And if we can only do it person by person, to change minds on Brexit via what I call Brexicisms, which doesn't involve swiveling your head round 180 degrees, but it's a soft process as well as a hard one, and via en masse meetings and what have you, such as we can do within the context of COVID. How to? Oh, before we get to how to, if we're going to do this at scale, we're going to need, first of all, a structure for agility and speed, which I shall come to next. And I'd like, if possible, to get donations on it. If you're not a donation person, I'd like you to consider contacting people that do. And there's a range of benefits. There's a crowdfunder, all the rest of it. It'd be set up properly as a limited company when we have sufficient cash to make it worthwhile. We don't have that situation at the moment. We've got we've got no money, but we raised about 3,000 quid nearly so far, but that's not enough. By the time you've paid an accountant, that's a third of it's gone. But at some point soon, we would do that. And as I said, it will die when Brexit is laid to rest and the culture carriers consigned to history. That's more important in a way than Brexit right now. And I particularly have no ambition to be a politician, as indeed our friends had no intention to be a mayor, but somehow that sort of happened. How could you get involved? This is the organisational structure of Reboot Britain, such as it is. Much of it is unpopulated at this stage, and indeed you might say,
sorry, Peter, I don't want to interrupt, but you know as well as I do that there is already an organisation called Reboot GB.
yes,
And you have been part of creating that.
yeah,
And you have now taken a lot of the content of the conversations you've been part of and pushed it into this. And I don't think that that's a good way to start a relationship in terms of how to progress about political honesty. So,
Liz, which parts have I taken? Because this presentation was made in March before we met.
Okay, if Peter, you have been party to management meetings of the Reboot organisation, and you have taken information from that and used it for this purpose. I don't have a date stamp on some of this information, but you are trying to replicate what you have already signed up to be part of. And I am finding that difficult to understand why we were in this space.
I think it is time for you to leave this meeting, Liz, because I need to look after 24 people's interest. I will only say now that the new slide in here is the one I'm speaking to right now, because I will unmute you in a moment, but none of the other stuff, that's all been around since March, and we only met, I think, in October. So I shall give you another word, but this is the thing that's been missing, is the structural slide. Do you have anything more to say? Because I do need to move on.
I do, and I'd very much welcome a conversation about how we've got to this point.
We'll do that.
And I'm very happy to have a conversation with anyone that is on this call, but I needed to say that because there is a degree of dishonesty here that I find difficult.
Well, in that case, I'm going to say goodbye, Liz, because I'm sticking by my principle. So goodbye. Sorry about that, folks. I'm going to carry on. You don't have to believe me, but I think that we've reached the point where we need a structure, and that's where I think Liz and I do agree. This is a very different structure anyway. So if I get back in the groove,